The first time Bran Stark understood that time was not a river, but a forest, he was already sitting at its heart. He sat motionless beneath the roots of the great weirwood, its pale limbs twisting up into sky that had no clear sun and no clear moon, only a soft, directionless light. The faces carved into the bark around him were not one face but many. Some wept, some screamed, some watched in silence. Sap like blood and milk trickled from their eyes into the living net of roots that coiled around his legs and wound up his spine like a second skeleton. He did not feel the roots as weight. To Bran, they were fingers, nerves, pathways. With every shallow breath, he felt 1,000 other lungs draw air. With every slow blink, he saw 1,000 winters and summers, layered like glass. Past, present, and what might yet be all lay together in the wood. The old three-eyed raven had told him he must only watch, never reach. The moment he died beneath the cave's falling stones, Bran had known that it had never been true. The world had never been a story written once. It was 1,000 drafts, 1,000 half-burnt parchments, strewn across ages, and Bran's task was not to read them. It was to choose one. He closed his eyes, though it changed nothing. Sight for him had stopped depending on such simple gestures. Around him, roots creaked and shifted with the slow patience of centuries. He inhaled, and instead of air, he drew memory. Snow. Dark stones rising from snow, taller than giants, older than kingdoms, older than names. A ring of black monoliths encircled a slab of rock, and around that slab moved small, lithe shapes, cloaked in moss and bark. Children of the forest, whispering in tongues that were more birdsong than speech. The air stank of cold iron and fear. Bound upon the stone lay a man. Human, dark beard crusted with frozen blood where he'd bitten through his lip fighting the ropes. His eyes were bright with fury and terror both, and they fixed upon the single weirwood at the edge of the circle, its roots tasting his spilled blood. Bran drifted closer, though he had no body here. The children pressed the dragon glass into the man's chest. He heard the scream as a flare of white across all his senses, like a star being born. This was where it had begun. This was where they made the first of the White Walkers, their answer to men with their bronze blades and iron axes, their burning forests and felled heart trees. In every tale told by Old Nan and Maester alike, this moment seemed fixed, a wound in the world. But Bran had learned otherwise. He whispered, Not with his mouth. His voice was a ripple in the roots, a breath through the faces, a shiver along the weirwood's pale trunk. The children felt it as a gust of wind that did not rustle leaves. The bound man felt it as a chill that was not from snow. Do not do this. Leaf, or a child very like her, paused, dragonglass dagger poised above the man's heart. Her golden eyes darted to the weirwood. She heard him. Bran felt it, the brief, sharp hook of attention. Do not make him. You do not understand what you call. He let more of himself bleed into the moment, threading through the roots and stones, filling the spaces between the children's quickened heartbeats. They shivered, looking at one another. Leaf's hand trembled. For the first time in all of Bran's visions, the dagger hesitated. It was like nudging a mountain. The old three-eyed raven had once told him, the ink is dry, but ink could be scraped, hewed away, covered with new lines. It only tore the parchment if you were careless. Leaf opened her mouth. In another version of this memory, one Bran had watched many times before, she said nothing, or muttered only the old words and drove the blade down. This time, her lips shaped a different sound. We must, she whispered to the wind that spoke through the tree. You have seen what they do. Bran pressed harder, like a boy pushing his shoulder against a door much too heavy for him. There are other ways, other paths. You do not see them yet, but I do. I can show you. For one heartbeat, he almost did it. The dagger lifted from the man's chest. The circle of children shifted. Futures budded like frost patterns on glass. Bran saw them all at once. Men and children standing together atop walls of black stone. Dragonfire scouring dead flesh from frozen fields. A pact made not from terror, but from need and respect both. Then something moved beneath the ice of time. An old power, colder than the winter wind and older than the first firemen stole from trees. It brushed against his reaching will like a hand brushing a fly aside. The man on the slab gasped. His eyes turned the blue of shattering sky. The dragon glass drove home. The White Walker's scream lanced up from the stone, and the world shuddered along with it. Bran's grip broke. The new futures he had almost birthed flickered, blackened, and blew away like ash. He recoiled, or would have, if he still had a body to flinch with. Instead, the weirwood forest around his awareness thrummed. Sap pulsed like a heartbeat through roots and branches, the whole network reacting to the strain. The carved faces twisted a little further, mouths contorting towards silent cries. You cannot unmake what has already become a bone in the world, the memory of Brynden Rivers said. It was not his shade. Bran knew better than to believe in easy ghosts. It was only what remained of the man's thoughts in the wood, patterns of root and sap. Then why can I change anything? Bran murmured, and his voice was a rustle of leaves across 1,000 groves. Because some things are trunks and some are only branches, came the answer, if answer it was. Cut a branch, and the tree heals. Try to rip out its heart and you tear the world apart. The White Walker rose from the stone, pale skin like carved hoarfrost, eyes blazing. The children of the forest fell to their knees. Bran watched, knowing that in this draft, just as in all the others, the creature turned its gaze unerringly toward the weirwood, toward him. It saw him, not as Bran Stark, not as king or cripple or boy from Winterfell. It saw the knot of power, the intrusion, the hand that had tried to pull the knife away, and it remembered. The moment broke like ice underfoot. Bran came back to himself beneath the weirwood in the present that he had chosen. He felt the rough grain of the carved face pressed against the back of his skull, the cold damp of earth against his fingers. Somewhere, very far away, his body sat in a wheeled wooden chair in the godswood of King's Landing. No, of the Red Keep as he had remade it, with a heart tree transplanted at its center. Somewhere, gods paced, and a small council waited on his slow, absent words. Those selves were distant. The true Bran was here, beneath the roots of the world, his mind threaded through every vein of living wood from the frost fangs to the summer sea. He let the ache of failure wash through him, then flow away. He had known that the making of the White Walkers was not a branch. That moment was older than the wall, older than the first men's songs. It was a stone sunk deep in the riverbed of time. He had pushed against it anyway, because sometimes the tree healed in ways even an old raven could not foresee. It had not, this time, and time itself had pushed back. So be it, Bran thought. Some beginnings are fixed. It is the rest that bends. He sank deeper, down the roots that coiled thickest beneath the lands of always winter, then out, spidering across the north. Memory flowed through him in streams and torrents, cold and bright. He let himself drift until he found another junction, another knot of consequence. The building of the wall. Stone rose from snow, blocks of black ice the size of houses, hauled up by ropes and will. The men below were little motes against the enormity of the task, their breath steaming as they shouted and sweated, even in that bitter air. Giants trudged alongside them, great hands shoving blocks into place, their bellows booming like drums. Children of the forest watched from the tree line, hands bound with weirwood bark and dragonglass, their magic laid into the very mortar. At the center of it all moved a man taller than most, broad-shouldered, his cloak pale with frost. He looked up more often than the others, squinting against the reflected glare of snow. His hair, dark and shaggy, whipped around his face in the wind. Each time he paused to study the line of the wall, it changed, ever so slightly. Bran knew him without needing to ask the wood for a name. Brandon the Builder. Not because the man had spoken, not because any heraldic banner flew. Bran knew him because the wall knew him, remembered the exact weight of his boots on each stone, the measure of his hand when he pressed his palm to its face as if feeling its strength. The weirwood at the edge of the frozen worksite remembered, and through that tree so did Bran. He slid closer, inhabiting the creak of ropes, the groan of timber, the breath of men and beasts. Here, the past was still wet clay. The wall was not yet a finished line of finality. He found the point he needed, a moment when Brandon stood alone at the base of the rising rampart, his men scattered to their tasks, his eyes tracking the sun's low arc. The future spun from this instant in thousands of branching threads. Walls lower and higher. Walls laced with more or less spellcraft. Walls abandoned half-built when winter proved too cruel or the first men too disunited. Bran brushed the man's thoughts. The sensation was strange, like sliding hand into a glove that almost fit. Brandon was stubborn and brilliant, his mind working in lines and angles and weights. He dreamed in stone, in spans and buttresses and load. He dreamed of more than the wall. Great halls, soaring keeps, towers whose foundations would outlast the bones of kings. Yet, he did not dream far enough. The long night to come was only a whisper at the edges of his awareness, a fear past in fireside tale and half-remembered vision. The children had told him things, but he understood them as one might understand stars. There, unreachable, beautiful, and threatening at once. Bran pressed deeper. Higher, he whispered into the marrow of the man's bones. Not just height, but depth. Foundations sunk like roots. Stone wound through with spells you do not yet know how to ask for. Brandon stiffened. His hand went to the wall as if pushed. Bran flooded him with a flicker of what he had seen. White shadows massed against the horizon, a tide of dead eyes and silent feet. Giants torn down, their bones rising again in blue flame. The wall buckling, cracking like old ice under too much weight. Brandon's breath hitched. He did not understand the vision, not fully, but he understood failure. The thought of everything he had built collapsing knifed through him. Higher, he muttered aloud, echoing the whisper he could not name. Stronger. He stalked toward the nearest gang of men, barking new orders. They protested. There were limits, Lord. Men could only haul so high. The winter would kill them all before the 10th course if he did not. Brandon cut them off with a gesture. We do not build for this winter, he said. We build for all winters. Bran felt the future shift. The wall rose another 20 feet in an instant of possibility. Then another 10 as giants brought in blocks from farther quarries, as the children bound spells deeper into the foundations. The change rippled out, altering small events unseen. Deaths by falls that never happened. Babies conceived because fathers returned to camp a day later than they otherwise would have. A raven that never froze mid-flight because the winds changed around the new height of the wall. He held tight, guiding until the shape of the barrier settled. Then, he let go. In another branch, he had tried the opposite. Made the wall lower, invited men and children both to practice what cooperation felt like without a looming division between north and south. In those drafts, the first long night never quite ended. Humanity survived in scattered burrows and caves huddled around dragon glass and old prayers. The wall in those futures became a legend of something they had never managed to build. In others, he had tried to turn Brandon aside entirely, to persuade him to construct not a single wall, but many smaller fortresses, a chain of linked towers spanning the breadth of the north. Those two had failed. The dead seeped through the gaps like cold through a cracked door. Hunters and rangers could not hold that many lines. This version, the taller wall, the deeper magic, gave the living a chance. Not a guarantee. Never that. But a chance. He rode the new current forward, testing. Centuries unfurled. Kings rose and fell in the north, some as Stark, some as other names when revolts and famines toppled dynasties Bran barely remembered. The Weirwood Forest kept the bones of each. South of the wall, first men met Andals at sword and wedding bed both. The faith rose, making war on old gods and new. Through it all, the wall held. But a wall was not enough. The White Walkers slumbered, learning what men did not know they were teaching. How to be clever, how to wait. The tree of time grew, branched, accumulated tragedies. Bran let the flow carry him forward to another knot. Aegon's dream. The young dragon lord stood alone in a stone room high atop Dragonstone, wind clawing at its narrow window. Firelight gilded his pale hair and cast his face into long, sharp shadows. On the table before him lay a map of Westeros, smooth leather inked with careful hands. Little carved pieces marked the great lords: Stag at Storm's End, Lion at Casterly Rock, Falcon in the Vale, Wolf in the North. His eyes were not on the map. They were fixed on the brazier, on the serpentine dance of flame that twisted and reared like a beast in chains. He had seen something in those flames. Bran knew, because the embers themselves remembered his stare. In some futures, Aegon Targaryen read his dreams narrowly. He saw only a crown and a continent bowed. In those drafts, he flew west on Balerion's back, black wings blotting out the sun, and the conquest burned the Seven Kingdoms into fearful unity. But once united, they turned inward, their wars smaller, but no less bloody. By the time the White Walkers stirred, the dragons were long gone, squandered in petty feuds. In others, Aegon never crossed at all. He kept his people clinging to the smoking rocks of Dragonstone, trading and raiding, a nuisance and nothing more. The White Walkers swept down over a fractured continent, unprepared and unled. This was not the future Bran had chosen. He slipped into the stone of the room, into the trembling band of iron around the brazier, into the hungry tongues of flame. He let the memory of what he had seen, what Brandon the Builder had seen, what the children had conjured, what he himself had faced under a sky full of dead storms, rise with the sparks into Aegon's eyes. The Dragon Lord stiffened. His fingers curled tighter around the carved dragon piece in his hand. Sweat stood out on his brow despite the chill of the tower. The flames showed him winter. Not just the tame winters Dragonstone knew with storms and hunger. The true winter. Seas stiffened into glass. Rivers choked with dead fish. White things moving through blizzards that howled with stolen voices. A wall of black stone and old magic, shining faintly under starlight. And beyond it, a darkness that thought. Aegon staggered back, chest heaving. He clutched at his throat as if the cold had already filled it. "What?" he whispered. "What is this?" "A future," Bran answered, though his words were only the crackle of wood, the hiss of sap. "Your future, if you do not prepare for it." He showed Aegon other visions, layered like the overlapping scales of a dragon. One where he conquered and forgot and left his line to crumble into madmen and weaklings. One where he never left Dragonstone and watched the sky darken with ravens fleeing north. One where he allied with Valyria instead, drawing his strength from an empire already doomed to fall into fire. And then one where he crossed the sea not only for crowns, but for winter. In that branch, Aegon still burned Harrenhal. He still forged the Iron Throne from the swords of fallen foes. But in his quietest hours, when courtiers and wives and enemies alike thought him brooding on tax or trade, he thought of coal. He thought of the Wall. He sent obsidian south in secret, buried caches of it beneath keeps whose lords never knew what they guarded. He ordered septons to preserve old tales of the Long Night, not as fables, but as warning. Bran had tried arguing. He had tried explaining. None of that had taken. Men, even dragon lords, did not believe in distant winters they had never seen. Dreams of crowns were sweeter. Fear, though, fear he understood. So Bran gave Aegon fear. When the dragon lord finally rose from the floor, his face was white. His fingers twitched around the dragon piece. "Then I must go," he whispered to the empty room, to the fire that had already died down to coals. "I must go, and my line must rule, or the world burns and freezes both." He placed the dragon down on the painted map, directly atop the sharp little wolf in the north. The world shivered around Bran as the choice settled. Lines of consequence pulled taut. Alliances yet unmade, tangled with wars yet unfought. Dragons wheeled over burning fields. Ships crossed stormy seas not for glory, but because an old nightmare had found a new dreamer. Bran let the vision go. The Targaryen conquest would happen in many forms, with more or less cruelty, but that root, the idea that a king must look north and see winter coming, would hold. It was not enough. He knew that. The dragons would die, as dragons always did. Men would forget, as men always do. But it bought centuries, space in which other branches could grow. He drifted forward, past King Jaehaerys knitting a realm together like a careful mother mending wool, past the slow poison of decadence in gilded halls, past the dance where dragons killed dragons and left the sky emptier with each shriek. In some drafts, he had tried to stop the civil war, whispering peace into the dreams of princes and princesses. In those futures, dragons survived longer, but so did the arrogance that came with them. When winter finally marched, Targaryens answered with fire that consumed armies and forests and cities alike, leaving a world broken even if the dead were pushed back. Better, he had decided, that their power be cut. Better that dragons remain a memory and a possibility than a blade in mad hands. And so the dance burned as it had always burned. Rhaenyra and Aegon, sons and daughters dead by the dozen. Bran watched from within the blackened stones, the charred trees, the melted towers. He did not intervene. He could not save everyone. That was the first rule he had learned. The second was crueler. Sometimes he had to kill them sooner, so that others could live later. Summerhall was one such knife. The castle stood in a ring of old stones and new walls, banners snapping in a wind tinged already with the smell of smoke. Aegon V paced its courtyard, older now, his silver hair sparse, his face lined. Dragon eggs sat on a bed of coals, dull and cracked, their color leached by time. In many branches, Aegon's folly killed only those who stood with him that night. Dragons did not hatch. Fire consumed the hall, leaving a legend of tragedy and whispers of shadowed shapes in flame. In others, Bran had tried to save them. He whispered caution into the king's dreams, let him wake sweating from visions of burned children. The old king listened, for he was not yet wholly lost to obsession. He doused the coals. He locked the eggs away. He died in his bed years later, never having seen a dragon stir. Those futures died too. Without Summerhall's fire, some subtle balance shifted. Rhaegar was never born, or he was born weaker, without the fierce, haunted hunger that had driven him to Lyanna Stark and the prophecy he thought he heard in old tales. Without Rhaegar, Jon was never conceived beneath the tower in Dorne. Without Jon, every path Bran walked ended in ash and ice. This time, in this chosen draft, Bran did not dissuade Aegon from tragedy. He did something worse. He nudged him closer. The old king stood over the eggs, lips moving silently. Bran poured the faintest hint of his power into the coals, letting them flare a little hotter, a little higher, just enough to kindle fresh hope in a heart already half mad with the desire to bring dragons. "Yes," Aegon whispered. "Yes, I see. Just a little more. We are so close." Bran saw the future where one egg cracked. A tiny dragonling uncurled, coughing weak flame, just enough to prove that magic was not dead. That glimpse of possibility rippled outwards. Maesters abandoned their dour skepticism. Septons dressed prophecy in finer robes. Every madman with a dream of destiny claimed to have the blood of the dragon. When winter came in those futures, the world met it in chaos. Dozens of self-proclaimed saviors, each clutching a half-grown, sickly worm or a broken relic, leading men to die in pointless battles while the dead advanced. So Bran snuffed that branch. He whispered colder into the stone of Summerhall, into the night air, into the damp wood of its beams. The fire, when it came, burned hotter to compensate, but it did not kindle dragon eggs. It only devoured flesh. Screams shook the keep. Stones exploded under sudden heat. The sky turned an ugly, lurid red. Bran held the pattern steady until it matched the version of Summerhall that led, years later, to Rhaegar standing in ruins, listening to the ghosts of dead kin and dead dreams, and imagining himself the hinge of history. "You are not," Bran might have told him, had he been crueler. "You are only one necessary misstep in a dance that has lasted 10,000 years. But he did not. He had learned the cost of careless words in another life, another body. "Hold the door, Hodor." Bran pushed forward, away from Summerhall, away from the screams he had arranged, and the bones he had ensured would never live to see the long night. He flowed along routes that wormed beneath city and field and castle, listening to the hum of a world that did not know it had almost ended 100 times already. He found another knot of time in a tower that never carried ravens. The Tower of Joy. Dawn-bleached stone, high and lonely, the desert wind keening around it. Blood on the rocks where men had already fallen. Eddard Stark stood in the tower's chamber, face gray with grief and dust. Sword at his belt, a dame of blade so ordinary beside the luminous beauty of dawn that lay across the lap of the dead night at his feet. Lyanna lay upon the bed. She was smaller than Bran had always imagined her when he was a boy, listening to old Nan's infrequent mutterings about Ned's sister. Smaller and thinner, sweat-slicked hair pasted to her forehead, the sheets beneath her stained dark. Her eyes were the same gray as all Stark's, but fever bright, darting from the rafters to her brother's face to the window and back again. And in her arms, wrapped in blood and linen, a child. Bran drifted closer, though in truth he was already here. He could feel his own presence in the room as a ghost lump in the air, the echo of the day he had watched this memory for the first time under the tutelage of the old three-eyed raven. That Bran had only watched, horrified and awestruck. This Bran was something more. He listened in that first draft as Lyanna whispered, "Promise me, Ned," and made his father a liar for love's sake. He felt the way the weirwood in Winterfell's godswood had soaked that promise into its roots every time Ned knelt beneath it. Guilt and grief woven together in silence. In countless branches, Bran had left it alone. In some, he had nudged Ned differently, let the name slip a little louder, let his father understand that Rhaegar's son might be the prince that was promised, or at least another kind of king. In those futures, Ned returned to Winterfell not with a bastard, but with a ward of the realm. A boy hidden in plain sight. Some of those Johns grew into lords, some into rebels, some into corpses buried in shallow graves outside Winterfell, when Robert's paranoia caught a whiff of Targaryen in their eyes. In others, Ned never made it out of the tower. Without Bran's subtle pressure, Arthur Dayne's blade cut deeper, faster, and Howland Reed's little knife never found the opening it needed. Lyanna died alone, her child left to die with her. Robert took the throne and drank himself to death years later, never knowing how close he had come to losing it to a nephew in the north. All those futures ended badly. Some collapsed in civil war long before winter came. Others stumbled into the long night half prepared, or without dragons or Starks or anything else that mattered. Only one pattern held. Bran slid between Ned's racing thoughts, not pushing, only angling. He made his father's hand steadier on the child. He soothed the spike of rebellion that rose when he thought of lying to Robert. He pressed, ever so gently, on the word Lyanna had chosen. Promise. Ned Stark, honorable to his marrow, shaped his whole life around that one syllable. Bran needed that. He needed a father who would raise Jon as a Stark and not as something more. Not yet, not until it was almost too late. "Promise me," Lyanna whispered, fingers clawing at Ned's arm. "Robert will kill him. They all will. Promise me, Ned." "I promise," Ned said, voice breaking. Bran watched the future shiver and snap into its familiar grooves. The journey north, the lie at Winterfell's gates, Caitlyn's cold stare at the baby she believed her husband had fathered elsewhere. Jon growing up as bastard, as outsider, as boy who watched from the edges and listened more than he spoke. A boy who would go to the wall not for glory, but to escape the feeling that he did not belong. That boy could be shaped. Bran could not have done what had to be done with a prince. The temptation was always there, though. To try. To see if there was some way to have it all. Dragons and unity and no betrayed fathers. A north that did not bleed at red weddings. A Stark family whole and laughing beneath Winterfell's boughs. He had walked those futures too. In one, he warned Ned years earlier, whispering into the rustle of Godswood leaves. Do not go south. Let Robert and Jon Arryn and the Lannisters fight their own battles. Ned listened. He stayed. Jon never went to the wall. Daenerys was strangled in her cradle by an assassin sent across the narrow sea by a king who never had to worry about offending Eddard Stark's honor. The White Walkers came. The North stood, proud and alone, and died proud and alone in the snow. In another, Bran whispered to Catelyn, easing the hardness in her heart. He made her see Jon as a scared boy, instead of a threat. She welcomed him properly, smoothed some of his sharper edges. He grew up steadier, surer of his place, less drawn to the harsh refuge of the Night's Watch. He married a daughter of some northern lord, fathered children whose blood mingled Stark and Targaryen both. When the White Walkers marched in that future, Jon fought in the snow outside Winterfell. A good lord, a brave swordsman. The Night King walked past his corpse without glancing down. In every such branch, something vital burned away with the comfort Bran granted. The hardness was necessary. The pain carved channels that later power could fill. He had learned that lesson most cruelly in a stable yard in Winterfell, watching himself fall. The stone tower loomed above, its windows dark. Below, the yard stretched wide and familiar, scents of hay and horses, and dung thick in the air. Younger Bran clung to the rough stone ledge high up, fingers numb, arms shaking, face flushed with the effort of climbing. It was a memory so vivid he could almost feel the sting of cold in his lungs again. He had come here 100 times, if not more, trying to see if there had ever been a way to avoid what happened next. The old raven had told him it was useless, that some things simply were. Bran had never been good at listening. He watched as his younger self scrambled up to the window and peered in. Watched the sudden sick widening of the boy's eyes at what he saw within. Watched the half-formed, confused understanding of what Cersei and Jaime Lannister were doing tangled in the rushes. Watched the queen rush to the window. Watched the knight lean out. The things I do for love, Jaime said. He pushed. In every early draft, Bran had tried to stop it. He'd screamed into the wind. He'd warged into ravens that flapped at Jaime's face. He'd tried to shove his younger self back from the ledge. The weight of the moment crushed his interventions like a mailed fist crushing a moth. At best, he'd managed to stumble instead of a clean fall, another angle of impact that broke different bones. The result was always the same. He fell. Once, only once, Bran had tried the unthinkable. He had tried to save himself by sacrificing someone else. He had reached not for himself or Jaime, not for Cersei or the window, but for a stable boy below, walking with a pail of water and a half-dozen other boys and girls around him. He had shoved hard, with all the will of a boy who remembered lying broken in his own blood. The stable boy slipped on ice, crashed into a stack of barrels. They toppled, scattering horses and children. Younger Bran had looked down at the sudden commotion. Jaime's push landed an instant later, but the boy's grip had shifted just enough that he caught hold of the windowsill by his fingertips. He hung, gasping, staring up into Jaime's stunned face. It had worked. For a moment, Bran had floated there in the yard, half disbelieving. His younger self clung. Jaime hesitated. Cersei hissed. Then, below, one of the barrels rolled at the wrong angle. It struck a lantern. Oil spilled, flame catching on straw and wood soaked with old grease. Fire jumped, hungry and wild. By the time Bran managed to sort cause from effect, half the stable was afire. Horses screamed. Children screamed. Men rushed with buckets, too few, too late. The smoke rose high enough that, somewhere else in the castle, someone looked out a window they had not in the original draft. A guard saw the queen's twin slipping from a tower room where he had no business being and drew the wrong conclusion. Or the right one. It did not matter. Whispers started that day that never started before. Jaime's sword hand met a different end in that path. Not cleanly severed in the Riverlands, but hacked off in a back alley of King's Landing by men with knives and orders to make it look like a cut purse's work. In that future, Joffrey died sooner, Sansa differently. Cersei roasted in wildfire years before she ever had a chance to have the sept of Baelor burn. War burst earlier and more chaotically, with no time for plots to ripen. Winter, when it came, found the South already half-ash, the North shattered by conflicts that had never had time to settle into any shape Bran could use. And the stable boy? He died in the fire Bran had lit. The three-eyed raven had dragged Bran out of that draft bodily, wrenching him back through the roots with a fury the old man had never shown before. "You cannot trade one innocent for another and call it wisdom," he had rasped. "You are not a god. You are a boy with a window into a library too large for any mind." But Bran had kept going back. Not to try to save himself anymore. That was one lesson even he had learned, but to understand the weight of that moment. To bruise his will against it until he could feel the pattern of force and consequence. In the end, he had found only one way through it. Not to stop the fall, but to embrace it. He hovered there now, invisible and everywhere. As Jaime's hands shoved, as younger Bran's fingers scrabbled futilely at stone, the world slowed around him to the thickness of honey. He could feel every path blooming from this moment. Bran dying outright. Bran surviving with shattered mind instead of shattered spine. Jaime hesitating, only to push later in some shadowed stairwell when there were no witnesses at all. In the draft he had chosen, Bran did not fight the shove. He did not grip at the sill. His fingers went slack a heartbeat earlier, a tiny yielding that let the fall take him cleanly. He hit the ground. Bones broke. Nerves cried out and then went silent forever. The pain folded inward like a blooming flower, petals of agony turning to determination in the boy's chest. It was that pain that drove him to the three-eyed raven, to the cave beyond the wall, to the weirwoods. It was that pain that taught him what it felt like to have his own body betray him, to wake each day inside a prison of flesh and wood. Without it, there was no Bran in the roots of the world. There was no hand to steer. So he let himself fall again, and again, every time he visited this memory. Not as punishment, as reminder. Other moments were crueler. Hold the door. He tried not to go back to that one often. Each time he did, the boy who had been Wireless died in new ways. Crushed, torn, frozen under the weight of the command Bran had carved into his mind from both ends of his life. It had been the first time he realized fully that his whispers could cross not just years, but the boundaries of a single soul. "If I save him, Mira dies," he had told himself, long after the fact, tracing branches. "Or I die. Or the Night King reaches the cave sooner. Or I never reach the heart of the wood at all. Never grow strong enough to pull at anything larger than a stable boy's mind." It was true. He had proved it, as he proved everything, by stepping along the branches of those possibilities until they withered under their own flaws. In one branch he let go of Hodor sooner, cutting the link before it could scar the boy's past self. In that world, Wireless remained whole, strong, kind, and simple both. He carried Bran all the way to the wall without complaint, his back as broad and steady as a wagon's. He never flinched at a storm, never balked at the sight of blood. He died at the wall, ripped apart by whites when the Night King's first true testing of its strength fell upon the Black Brothers. In that draft, Bran never made it south. The world ended at the wall instead of Winterfell's field. In another, Hodor survived the cave by dying earlier, outside, buying them time with a stand in the snow against whites that had not yet learned to mass or flank. Mira got Bran to the tree in time. The old raven lived another day. Bran learned a different lesson about sacrifice. He still learned it. Someone always died. There were no futures without death, only different names on the stones. Bran learned to count differently. Not individual lives balanced on scales, but arcs of meaning, the flows of power and memory that needed to survive if the world was to stand. Old gods and new dragons and wolves, fire and ice. Everything the singers had ever made into metaphor, he learned to weigh like coin. His greatest test, though, did not come in the distant past. It came in a city built not of black stone and winter, but of red brick and dragon skulls. King's Landing. He hated it more each time he saw it. Not for what it was. All cities were filth and splendor braided together. But for how many times it burned. In some drafts, Cersei destroyed it herself. Wildfire making green suns in the streets. The Sept's ruin only a prelude. In others, dragons reduced it to molten stone under the command of kings and queens, whose names and faces blurred together over centuries. In still others, it fell to plague or to famine, or to a slow, grinding decay as trade routes shifted and power bled north or west. In the one that mattered, it burned under Daenerys Targaryen. Bran had walked her life as he had walked others. He had followed her as a child through the echoing halls where Viserys struck her for asking a question too loudly. He had sat on her shoulder in the shape of a quiet, watchful bird on the day she watched her enemies melt in dragonfire outside Meereen. He had perched on the prow of her ship when she sailed west, the salt wind whipping white hair into her eyes. He had seen the coin flip in her soul, over and over, sometimes landing on justice, sometimes on vengeance, sometimes on something that looked like both and neither. There were versions of history where he had tried to guide that coin. He had whispered to her in the red wastes, giving her the strength to walk away from the path Mirri Maz Dûr had offered. In those branches, she traded less in blood for magic, but the dragons that hatched from Khal Drogo's pyre staggered, smaller, weaker. They died one by one of sickness and storms. Without them, Daenerys found other tools, more human and more cruel. He had whispered to her in Meereen, urging mercy over crucifixion, patience over burning whole families for the sins of a few. She listened sometimes. In those futures, the city rotted under compromise instead, its slavers biding their time until she sailed away and left a power vacuum no one could fill. He had whispered to her on the walls of King's Landing. At the moment the bells rang. In the branch where she truly heard him, she pulled Drogon up, away, his flames searing only the sky. She took the surrender she had won. She walked through streets filled with cowering people and refused to kill them. The coin that day came down on mercy. The world celebrated. The songs were beautiful. Jon never had to put a knife through the woman he loved. When the White Walkers came in that future, they found a city full of people who believed the worst was behind them. Daenerys flew north reluctantly, stretched thin between her need to govern and her need to save. When she died in the snow outside Winterfell, burned in her own dragon's misfired flame as she tried to strike down the Night King, the army she had brought fractured. Some fled south. Some refused to take orders from a bastard from the north. Some turned on each other. King's Landing burned anyway in that world. Not by dragonfire, but by desperate men trying to hold a line they barely understood. Bran had walked that ending to its cold conclusion. The White Walkers on the steps of the Red Keep, blue flames licking at tapestries. The Iron Throne rhymed with ice. The last man died kneeling. The dead kept walking, driven not by hunger or hatred, but by the simple, unstoppable forward momentum of winter. He had walked back from that future with frost still caught in his mind's corners. In the branch he chose, he did not stay Daenerys' hand. He did not drive her to madness either. That lay in seeds planted long before he ever touched the tree. In a life shaped by exile and betrayal, and visions of chosenness whispered by men with their own plans. But he did not soften the moment when the bells rang. He did not soothe the taste of ashes in her mouth at the sight of Lannister's soldiers dropping their swords. He let the coin fall. Drogon's fire turned streets into rivers of molten stone. Shadows burned into walls. Children screamed and then did not scream. Smoke rose in a column that the world would see for miles. Bran watched it all, not from the walls, as Arya did, nor from the fleet, nor even from the back of the dragon. He watched from the weir woods beyond the city, from the sap-soaked faces of old trees uprooted centuries ago and turned into beams and boards and idols in quiet sep. He watched, and in his watching he kept one thread taut. Jon died day. He nudged Jon toward the throne room on the day after the fire, nudged him to Dany's side, nudged his hand toward the hilt of the knife, and then the knife toward her heart. It was a lighter touch than anything he had done with Hodor or Brandon the Builder. Jon's will was strong, and his sense of rightness had been forged in a colder furnace than dragonfire. Bran did not need to flood him with visions. He only had to show him one future, the one where Jon did nothing. Daenerys lived in that branch. Lived and took the throne. Lived and tried to make the world better with the only tools she trusted: fire and fear. The North bent the knee or burned. Winterfell's heart tree charred but did not die. Bran had screamed silently as flame raced up its trunk, searing the faces carved there. The White Walkers came as they always did. They found a queen who believed dragons could burn the cold out of the world. She tried. For a time, it even seemed to work. But fire cannot kill what was born from deeper, older ice. It only angers it. In every draft where Jon stayed his hand, Bran watched the world end under a sky half black with smoke and half white with falling snow. So he let this version unfold. Jon's knife slid in. Daenerys gasped, eyes wide, disbelief and betrayal, and something like relief all flashing in a single moment. Drogon's roar shook the rubbled halls. Bran felt that death echo through the wood like a snapped bough. He added it to the weight of all the other deaths he had balanced. Lyanna's blood on stones, Hodor's heart stuttering beneath white claws, the charred children of Summerhall, the frozen rangers at the fist of the first men. He followed Drogon's grief into the east, into high clouds and storms where men's stories did not reach. He saw the dragon's grief cool into a kind of wary watchfulness, a beast whose rage might yet be needed when the next winter came. He saw the throne melt and drip and vanish. In the vacuum that followed, men named him king. That too he had shaped. In some futures, Sansa refused the North's independence, bound instead to the rest of the realm in a marriage engineered by others. In those, she either broke or broke others trying to carve a place for herself with all the tools that had been used against her. In others, she took the Iron Throne herself, queen of South and North alike. She was good at it. Too good. She wrapped her mind around power like armor, and when winter came again, different winter, second long night, she met it as a politician, not a myth. He needed something else. So he whispered, in the quiet hours of councils and marches, not to Sansa, but to those around her. He let their unease at the idea of a woman ruling all, not just in the North, but in dragon-melted King's Landing, ferment into a suggestion passed to Tyrion Lannister, into an idea the imp shaped into a speech. Who better to rule than the man who could see all? He had almost laughed the first time he heard that. Laughed, and then wept, when he followed that choice along its branches and saw where it failed and where, finally, it held. In one branch, he declined. He remained in the North, in a chair beneath the heart tree of Winterfell, eyes white more often than brown. Some other poor soul took the throne in the South, and the patchwork realm frayed faster at the edges. Scattered, quarreling kingdoms met winter, separately, and died separately. In another, he accepted but tried to rule actively, answering every petition with the full weight of his knowledge. The realm turned brittle under his hand. Men mistrusted a king who knew their crimes before they committed them. He saw revolt coming and headed it off, saw murder coming and prevented it, saw pain and excised it. The realm did not bleed. It strangled slowly, choked on its own peace. Men ceasing to do anything because their king did everything. The branch he chose was narrower, a path between knowing and acting, between guiding and dictating. He accepted the crown. He offered decisions sparingly. He let his council argue and err and learn, stepping in only when a choice would cut one of the few roots he knew could not be spared. And when the last piece was in place, Jon on the wall, Sansa in the North, Arya sailing west into stories other than his. Bran went back to the tree, to the forest, to the hundreds of thousands of branches he had not yet walked. He sat there now, in that muted light that was neither dawn nor dusk, feeling the world hum around him. Each life below was a thread in a tapestry he could never fully see, not from any single angle. There were other threats, other winters, other summers, old things in the deep places of the sea that dreamed of rising when men forgot that the land was supposed to belong to anyone but them. Plagues that might come from east or south, dragons that might yet hatch from stone warmed by careless hands. He could stop some of them. Not all, never all. Every time he reached back to nudge or whisper, he risked making the tree grow wrong, its roots tearing free of the soil that held them. He had felt that once, when he had pushed too hard at the children's ritual, when the White Walker had looked at him and recognized something like itself, a being born of magic older than men, meddling with what should only be watched. He could still feel that gaze sometimes in his dreams, as if across a gulf, not only of land and time, but of possibility. In some other draft, perhaps the Walker had won. In some other draft, Bran had become something like it instead of the quiet boy beneath the tree. He breathed. "You are not a god," his memory of Brynden Rivers said again, more gently this time. "No," Bran agreed. "I'm only the boy who fell." He thought of all the lives that had balanced on that fall. Jon and Sansa and Arya and Rickon, dead and alive in hundreds of permutations. The free folk, sometimes slaughtered, sometimes never permitted south, sometimes ruling a kingdom of their own amid the ruins of the north. Daenerys, burning and burned. Cersei crushed or triumphant. Tyrion buried nameless in mass graves or dying of age in a library that smelled of dust and wine. The only future that survived was the one that made room for as many of them as it could without breaking the whole. It was not a happy future. Too many people had died to make it. Too many would still die tomorrow, from petty causes that had nothing to do with old powers. A farmer's son kicked by a cow. A girl in Gulltown swept off the pier in a storm. A boy in Old Town who swallowed spoiled meat and never woke. He could save some of those too if he chose. Whisper a warning. Make a cow shift its weight differently. Draw a ship's captain's eye to the clouds at the right moment. He did sometimes. Not often. Not enough. But sometimes, when the weight of all he had chosen to let happen threatened to press him flat in his chair in the Godswood, he reached for some small kindness and let it be. He watched a little girl in Winter Town tug her brother back from a slippery patch of ice because a raven's caw made her look down just then. He watched a man in the Vale change his mind about stepping off a cliff because a gust of wind seemed to him like a hand on his chest. He watched Samuel Tarly put down a loaf of moldy bread and reach for a fresher one on a shelf because a rat knocked it loose at the right time. These things did not change the shape of the world. They did not build or topple walls, start or finish wars. They were twigs, not branches, but even twigs mattered to the tree. Some nights, Bran let himself follow lives that had nothing to do with gods or kings. He watched a mason in White Harbor build a new quay. He watched a dancer in Bravos twist and leap in a square, her hat filling with coins. He watched a shepherd in the Reach teach his son how to listen for wolves. Real wolves, with teeth and hunger. Not sigils or Starks or any of the other things that name had grown to mean. He watched and did not reach, because not every moment had to be shaped. Not every breath had to be guided. When he was younger, the sheer scale of what he could see had frightened him. He had thought that if he did not attend to everything, the world would fall. Now he knew better. The world would fall, someday. That was the oldest certainty written in wood and stone both. Walls crumbled, trees rotted, even winters ended, and new ones began. His task was never to prevent that, only to buy more time for men and children and dragons and giants, for weirwoods and deerwolves and the stubborn, ridiculous, beautiful kingdoms of men to exist between the beginnings and the endings. to give them space in which to make their own mistakes, their own joys, their own small, shining kindnesses in the dark. He opened his eyes. The gods wood of King's Landing lay around him, as much an echo as anything in the past. The air smelled of the sea and the city's filth, but beneath that, faint and stubborn, the clean resin of heart-tree sap. The red leaves above whispered in a wind that did not quite reach down into the courtyard. Brienne stood a little way off, silent, hand resting on the pommel of Oathkeeper. Her armor caught stray flecks of sunlight. The rest of the guard gave them space. They always did, uneasily respectful of their king's strange worship. Bran's neck creaked as he turned his head. It felt like moving a mask carved from wood. Perhaps in truth it was. He looked up at the carved face above him. Its eyes wept slow, sticky tears of red. "Will it be enough?" Brienne asked softly, not quite looking at him. It was not the first time she had asked. She spoke of some new border uprising, some petty quarrel over a toll road, small things compared to what he had seen. It did not matter. The question beneath her words was always the same. Bran considered a dozen answers, all true in their own ways. He chose the simplest. "For now," he said. Brienne nodded once. She believed him. Not because of any magic, not because he saw past and future, but because he spoke rarely and did not waste words. That trust was its own sort of power, one he tried not to abuse. He closed his eyes again. Roots waited for him, beneath his chair, beneath the castle, beneath all of Westeros. Each time he went back into them, he risked unmaking what he had made, even if only in small ways, ripples that might take centuries to crest. But he went back anyway. There were still branches to prune, still tiny nudges to make. In the far north, beyond the Frostfangs, a child was being born in a village that did not yet have a name. The weirwood that had watched its parents' first nervous fumblings knew that this child would one day walk alone into a storm no one else dared face, carrying only a torch and a story heard at secondhand. If she lived, she would close a door Bran had not yet even seen. If she died, something old and cold under the ice would flex and stretch and start to wake. Bran reached for her, just a little, gently as a falling leaf. Not to change who she was, only to make sure she survived the first winter fever, the one that would have killed her in most drafts. A log on the fire, a kettle set to boil at the right time, a raven croaking outside her mother's window, making the woman look up from her numb despair and see the way her daughter's lips were turning blue. He brushed that future into being, then withdrew. Elsewhere, in Old Town, a novice was sneaking into a forbidden section of the Citadel's library, eyes bright with mischief and hunger for knowledge. He would find, if left unchecked, a scroll that had driven lesser men mad or convinced them to burn half the world in search of power. Bran had watched 12 versions of that boy's life. Only one did not end in disaster. This time, Bran whispered dust into his nose. The boy sneezed, loud as a dropped book. Footsteps sounded from around the corner. Panicked, the novice shoved the dangerous scroll back onto its shelf at random and fled, his heart pounding. The maester who arrived a moment later saw nothing amiss, and the worst of that path slept on. Small changes. Tiny ones. The great moments, the trunks, were mostly chosen now. The White Walkers had come and gone. The wall had stood and cracked and been patched. Dragons had hatched and died and might one day hatch again. The stark words had been proved and reproved. Winter had come. Winter had gone. There would be other winters. Other threats. Bran would meet them as he had met the last. Not by pretending he could save everyone, but by finding the paths where someone survived. He thought suddenly of Rickon, wild and laughing, hair in his eyes, a blur of small feet racing down Winterfell's halls. There had been branches where Bran had saved him, whispered to Osha to take the boy farther, faster, urged Umber to stay true. In those futures, Rickon had grown into a Stark as fierce as any of their line, wolf blood bubbling under his skin. None of those futures held. So he had let his brother die on a Bolton field. For that, and for much else, the tree would not absolve him. The carved faces did not smile. The sighing leaves did not sing comfort. But neither did they condemn him. They just were. Bran had learned to take his measure of mercy from them. He breathed in, and the world breathed with him. Snow fell in the north. Rain lashed ships in the narrow sea. The sun baked the red sands of Dorne. Far to the west, Arya stood on the deck of a ship whose name Bran did not bother to learn. Hair whipped to a snarl by winds that smelled of salt and lands no mapmaker in Westeros had yet inked. For a moment, he let his mind rest there, perched on the masthead, watching as her laughter was stolen by the wind. In some futures, she would find horrors out there. In others, wonders. In a few, she would find both and return with tales that sounded like lies and would still be more true than most histories. He would not guide her hand. Arya was a branch that had grown wild and strong after a storm. To try to prune her would be to break her. He loved her too much for that. Besides, the world needed some surprises even for him. He had seen enough to know that for all his efforts, for all his careful balancing and cruel choices, there were still shadows in the corners of the forest where his sight did not reach. Blind spots. Places where the old gods, or whatever lay beneath that name, had left some room for chance. He did not know if that was a kindness or a trap. He only knew it made the work bearable. You altered every key moment in history, he thought, echoing words he had once heard in a dream. You built the only future that could survive. It sounded like praise. It felt like an indictment. He let both be true. The roots curled a little tighter around his chair, anchoring him. Above, the red leaves of the heart tree rustled, though no wind blew in the godswood at all. Bran closed his eyes and went back into the forest.